be continuing our notes on photosynthesis. So photosynthesis takes place inside the organelle called chloroplast. Chloroplasts contain sac-like photosynthetic membranes called thylakoids, which are interconnected and arranged in stacks known as grana. So here we have a chloroplast. We are going to find chloroplasts inside of plant cells. More specifically, we'll really only find them in the leaves. We're only going to find them in the parts of plants that are green. If a part of a plant isn't green, we would not expect to find many chloroplasts. So inside there are these little stacks, they look like little green coins stacked up. They are called thylakoids. They are connected into groups called grana. So the pigments that would be the chlorophyll are located in the thylakoid membranes. The fluid portion outside of the thylakoid is known as the stroma. So this fluid portion is the stroma. The connected portion is the grana. And all the individual pieces are thylakoids. So when chlorophyll absorbs light energy, the light energy is transferred to electrons. These high energy electrons make photosynthesis work. So this diagram is going to be your most important diagram to understand this process. We're going to go through this chemical process to a fairly large degree of detail because for people who go on and study more biology, this is a process that they need to know to a degree of detail because it is fundamental to how biology works, because this is how all of the food gets made. So we're going to break down this diagram. It has two sides. It has the light-dependent reactions on this side. It has the light-independent reactions on this side. So the light-dependent reactions uses water. We have H2O. It also uses light, as the name light-dependent would say. This takes place in the thylakoid, so it takes place in those stacks of green things. It releases O2, so it's releasing oxygen. Now, it is producing ATP and NADPH as well. That ATP and NADPH are going to the light-independent reaction. And the light-independent reaction, carbon dioxide is used, so CO2 goes into this cycle. Out of this cycle comes sugars, so we're going to get glucose out. This is going to release ADP and NADP+. Both of these are lower energy versions of this. So in the light-dependent reactions, it makes these high-energy compounds that then go to the light-independent reactions, which take carbon dioxide to produce sugars, is the basic process. So photosynthesis uses energy of sunlight to convert water and carbon dioxide into high-energy sugars and oxygen. This reaction you need to know. You need to know this reaction in words. You need to know this reaction in symbols. You need to know this reaction forwards, and you need to know this reaction backwards, because backwards it's cellular respiration. This is the fundamental way that energy is stored and transferred in living systems on our planet. So the light-dependent reactions require the direct involvement of light and light-absorbing pigment. So now we're going to just be looking at the light-dependent reaction. So we have light-absorbing pigments in the thylakoid. Light is going to strike those. That is going to produce high-energy electrons that can do work. So the light-dependent reactions use energy from sunlight to produce ATP and NADPH. These reactions take place within the thylakoid membrane of the chloroplast. So water is required as a source of electrons and hydrogen ions. Oxygen is released as a byproduct. So we have water going in, oxygen going out. Hydrogen ions are also getting transferred. So on the other side, now we're going to talk briefly about the light-independent reactions. So the light-independent reactions, ATP and NADPH molecules are used to produce high-energy sugars from carbon dioxide. So the energy from ATP and NADPH are used to take carbon dioxide to a very low-energy substance and produce sugars, which store energy. No light is required to power the light-independent reactions. They used to call these the dark reactions. They call them light-independent because they can work in the light or in the dark. They just don't need light to work. So light-independent reactions only take place outside the thylakoid in a place called the stroma. So they take place out in this fluid part of the stroma, not in the thylakoid. So now we're going to go through the light-dependent reaction in some depth. So we're going to go through the light-dependent reactions today. We will save the light-independent reactions for another day. So the thylakoid membrane has clusters of chlorophyll and proteins known as photosystems. The photosystems absorb sunlight and generate high-energy electrons that are then passed to a series of electron carriers. Light energy is absorbed by electrons in the pigments within photosystem 2, increasing the electron's energy level. So the start of this is going to be photosystem 2. So the high energy electrons are passed to the electron transport chain, which is a series of electron carriers that move high energy electrons during ATP generating reactions. So what is going on here is we have a light, most likely from the sun, and that light is interacting with chlorophyll that's in the photosystem 1 and the photosystem 2. That is producing some high energy electrons. Those electrons are passed along from molecule to molecule, doing a few things. It's going to be moving some hydrogen ions, breaking some water molecules apart, and then finally producing ATP in the end. So the thylakoid membrane provides new electrons to chlorophyll from water molecules. There's enzymes inside of the thylakoid that break water down into 2 electrons, 2 hydrogen ions, and 1 oxygen atom. So if we have 2 molecules of water, we're going to get 4 hydrogen ions, 4 electrons, and 1 molecule of oxygen gas. The 2 electrons replace the high energy electrons that have been lost to the electron transport chain. So all of this is like a conveyor belt. There are constantly electrons in every position, and as new electrons are excited, they can then move forward and use their energy at the next location. Oxygen is released to the air. This reaction is the source of nearly all of the oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere. This oxygen is a waste product to the plants that they are giving off that allows us to break down their sugars. The hydrogen ions are released inside of the thylakoid. They will be important later. So, energy from the electrons is used by proteins in the electron transport chain to pump hydrogen ions from the stroma into the thylakoid. So again, the stroma is the fluidy portion. The thylakoid is everything that's going on inside of these stacks. So there are pumps that are going to pump hydrogen ions from the stroma into the thylakoid space. So this thylakoid space is going to have a whole bunch of hydrogen ions in it. So it's going to be charged. At the end of the electron transport chain, the electrons pass to photosystem 1. Photosystem 2 is before photosystem 1. I didn't name them, okay? Don't ask me. Because some energy has been used to pump the hydrogen ions across the thylakoid membrane, electrons do not contain as much energy as they use when they reach photosystem 1. Pigments in photosystem 1 use energy from light to re-energize the electrons. So light is going to be striking these photosystems, and that is going to be providing the energy to power this process. At the end of a second short electron transport chain, NADP plus molecules in the stroma pick up high energy electrons and hydrogen ions at the outer surface of the thylakoid membrane to become NADPH. Hydrogen ions accumulate within the thylakoid space, from the splitting of water and from being pumped in from the stroma. The buildup of hydrogen ions makes the stroma negatively charged relative to the space within the thylakoids. So this thylakoid space ends up being a highly positively charged. It has all of these H plus ions being pumped into it. And all this H plus doesn't want to be in here. It wants to get out. It wants to spread out. And the only way through is this one protein of ATP synthase. So we have a gradient, which is a difference in the amount of H plus that is inside and the amount of H plus that is outside. So this is going to provide the energy to make ATP. So the hydrogen ions cannot cross the thylakoid membrane. However, the thylakoid membrane has a protein called ATP synthase that spans it. The membrane allows hydrogen ions to pass through. This rotates. As it rotates, it forces ADP and phosphate to bind to make ATP. So powered by the gradient of hydrogen ions passing through ATP synthase and force it to rotate. As it rotates, ATP synthase binds ADP and phosphate group together to produce ATP. This process, called chemosynthesis, enables light-dependent electron transport to produce not only NADPH, but ATP as well. So, we are again going to do a quick summary of everything that went on in this light-dependent reaction. So the light-dependent reactions produce oxygen gas and convert ADP and NADP plus into the energy carriers ATP and NADPH. ATP and NADPH provide the energy needed to build high energy sugars from low energy carbon dioxide. So we are going to end there for today. The next video will have information on the light independent reactions. Thank you. Have a good day.